There is a voice speaking inside your mind right now. It has been speaking to you since the exact fraction of a second your eyes opened this morning. It has been your most constant and perhaps your most brutal traveling companion for as long as you have been alive. Listen to it. Even as you hear my words, that inner voice is already running a parallel dialogue. It is analyzing, it is judging, it is remembering an embarrassment from 3 years ago. It is projecting an anxiety about next Tuesday. It operates entirely without your permission, spinning continuously in the dark theater of your own head. There is an ancient secret, one that the most accomplished people you have ever admired, the ones living the lives you quietly long for, have never openly shared with you. And it has absolutely nothing to do with intelligence or financial connections or the random luck of geography. The greatest thinkers who mapped the deepest layers of the human mind, including the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, discovered this truth long before the modern world had the language to describe it. The secret is this: the most powerful individuals on this planet are simply the ones who have figured out how to govern that voice. While you walk down the street mentally scolding yourself, replaying your past mistakes on an endless, exhausting loop, the people you admire are using that exact same inner space to construct their next victory. While you use your inner voice to rehearse failure, they use that identical voice to rehearse success. While you speak to yourself as though you were your own worst enemy, they speak to themselves as though they were their own most trusted companion. This is not an empty motivational phrase. It is not a naive suggestion to force a smile and think positive thoughts. As Carl Jung pointed out over a century ago, your internal dialogue is the literal programming language of your physical reality. It is the operating system of your entire existence. And right now, unfortunately, you are running on faulty software. You are operating on code that was installed in your mind years ago by other people, without your awareness and without your consent. But the architecture of the mind is not fixed. You can rewrite the code. Today, I am going to hand you the exact mechanism to debug your own psyche. Drawing from the clinical depth of Carl Jung, we are going to look at how to reconstruct your inner reality in precisely 7 days. We are going to stop settling for the limited, painful life you assumed you deserved and begin building the one you actually desire. This is powerful speech. Chapter 1: The Invisible Prison. Let us examine the architecture of your average day. Science tells us that approximately 60,000 separate thoughts pass through the human mind every single 24 hours. 60,000 fragments of language, image, memory, and projection. That is the raw material you are given to build your life. Now ask yourself a highly uncomfortable question. How many of those 60,000 thoughts are actually new? For the vast majority of people, 90% of the thoughts they will have today are the exact same thoughts they had yesterday and the day before that. They wake up, and before their feet even touch the floor, the mind immediately reaches for the same worn-out record. The same financial anxieties, the same quiet resentment toward a coworker, the same heavy, suffocating belief that they are fundamentally not quite good enough to have the things they want. This mental noise operates like a broken radio station, playing softly in the background of your life morning to night. And for most people, that station only plays the saddest, most defeated songs from their own personal archive. Think about the physical reality of how you treat yourself. Think about the exact words you use in your head when you drop a glass in the kitchen. Think about the language you use when you make a minor mistake at work or when you look at your own body in the mirror before a shower. You hurl crushing, demeaning insults at your own reflection. You use words that are sharp, unforgiving, and cruel. You would never look your closest friend in the eyes and say the things you say to yourself. If a stranger walked up to someone you loved and spoke to them the way your inner voice speaks to you, you would defend them physically. You would demand the stranger leave. Yet you accept this abuse from your own mind without a moment's hesitation. You surrender to it. Why does this matter so deeply? Because your mind is a flawless, impartial mirror. The outer world is always, and without exception,
a direct reflection of the inner one. Your thoughts generate your emotional state. Your emotional state dictates your physical actions, and your actions dictate the material results of your life. This cycle either keeps you locked in an invisible prison of your own making, or it sets you entirely free. If you are experiencing a permanent drought in your finances, listen very closely to the invisible whisper in your head about money. Notice how it tells you that wealth is for other people. Notice how it tells you that asking for what you are worth is arrogant. If your relationships constantly collapse into ash, pay absolute attention to the internal narrative you carry about love. Listen to the voice that quietly insists you will inevitably be abandoned, and watch how your behavior secretly engineers that exact abandonment. You have been programming yourself unconsciously your entire life. You wake up, you mentally plan for everything that could possibly go wrong, you tell yourself you lack the capacity to handle it, and then you genuinely wonder why life feels so relentlessly difficult. The people who have built empires, the ones who command the room, the ones who sleep peacefully at night, do not do this. Do you honestly believe the most confident person you know wakes up and immediately begins listing their deficiencies? Do you think they walk into a boardroom silently reminding themselves of a mistake they made in the 3rd grade? They do not. They have simply learned how to step outside of the automatic programming. They learned to separate themselves from the voice. They learned that the mind is a machine, and they chose to take the controls.
Chapter 2. The Architect's Discovery. To understand how to master the voice, you must first understand where it actually comes from. Long before the era of functional brain scans and modern neuroscience, Carl Jung sat in his study in Switzerland, listening to the deepest, darkest fears of his patients. Day after day, year after year, he listened to the things people only admit when the door is closed and the room is quiet. He began to notice a terrifying pattern. He realized that the self-destructive thoughts tormenting his patients did not actually feel like their own. The thoughts felt alien. They felt inherited. In the winter of 1913, Jung himself descended into this madness. He had broken away from his mentor, Sigmund Freud. The cost of that intellectual rebellion was total isolation. The academic community turned its back on him. He was alone. And in that isolation, his own inner voice turned against him violently. He experienced waking dreams. He heard harsh, condemning voices in his head. The firm ground of his own sanity began to crack. Most men would have run from this. They would have drowned the voices in alcohol, or meaningless work, or the endless distractions of high society. Jung did the opposite. Every night, he sat alone at his heavy wooden desk, opened a large red leather manuscript, and deliberately spoke to the voices. He documented the terror. He mapped the landscape of his own mind. Through this process, he discovered a territory he called the collective unconscious, and within it, he identified the shadow. He realized a profound truth about human development. We were all taught in school how to read a book, how to write a sentence, and how to calculate a mathematical equation. But not one of us was ever sat down in a quiet room and taught how to speak to ourselves. Nature abhors a vacuum. Because you were never taught how to generate your own internal dialogue, your mind simply recorded the dialogue of your environment. You absorbed the vocal patterns of the people who raised you. Your highly critical inner voice might not be your voice at all. It might simply be the internalized anxiety of a deeply worried mother. It might be the harsh, unyielding discipline of a frustrated father. It might be the heavy, cynical weight of a culture that confuses self-punishment with humility and ambition with greed. You absorbed their fears. You recorded their limitations. You swallowed their unresolved trauma. And you have been playing it all back to yourself for decades, mistaking their ghost
for your own identity. Jung understood that the human nervous system cannot reliably distinguish between a physical threat in the real world and a vividly imagined threat in the mind. When you tell yourself that you are incapable of surviving a failure, your brain accepts this as absolute physical reality. It begins shutting down the creative centers. It lowers your posture. It alters your breathing. It releases stress hormones that age your cells. It reorganizes your entire biology to match the tragedy you have written in your head. But the inverse is also true. When you consistently speak as though you are already becoming the person you want to be, your mind accepts that as truth too. It begins scanning the environment for opportunities instead of threats. It stands taller. It breathes deeper. The true awakening is the realization that you are not your thoughts. You are the consciousness that is listening to them. You are the space in which the thoughts occur. And because you are the listener, you have the absolute authority to fire the speaker and hire a new one. Carl Jung left behind a map of this exact psychological trap, and if you learn to read it, you can finally find your way out. Chapter 3: The Map of the Shadow. You believe that the world happens to you. You look at the trajectory of your days, the limitations of your bank account, the friction in your home, and you genuinely believe that your suffering is caused by your circumstances. You blame your history. You blame the people who have wronged you. You blame the era you were born into. Jung observed this exact condition in thousands of patients, and he realized that this is the great illusion of the unexamined life. Your external world is nothing but a shadow cast by your internal state. Your physical environment is merely a mirror reflecting the conversation you are constantly holding with yourself in the dark. Jung spent his entire life exploring the basement of the human soul. He sat in the quiet and looked directly at the things that men and women hide from themselves. And he left the modern world with a severe, unavoidable warning. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Look at the repeated failures in your own life, the jobs that went nowhere, the relationships that turned to ash, the creative pursuits you abandoned before you even bought the tools. You call it bad luck. You call it a difficult destiny. It is not destiny. It is your own unlit mind at work. Jung discovered that you harbor an inner tyrant. He called this the shadow. It is an unconscious force that demands you stay small. Why? Because to the ego, staying small is safe. The human mind is terrified of the unknown. It would rather you be miserable and secure than joyous and exposed to risk. When you attempt to rise, when you attempt to change the pattern of your life, this internal tyrant attacks you. It speaks to you in the language of absolute doubt. It weaponizes your own memory against you. It reminds you of every time you have fallen, every time you were embarrassed, every time you were not chosen. And you listen to it. You bow your head and you surrender your authority to a phantom. You punish yourself because it is profoundly easier to be the victim of your own mind than it is to accept the terrifying responsibility of becoming its master. To become what Jung called individuated, to become a whole, integrated, and complete human being, he insisted that you must enter into the dark architecture of your own psyche and face this voice. You must look at the terrible, heavy things you say to yourself in the mirror and ask the hardest questions of your life. Whose voice is this? Who put this belief inside me? Did I choose this thought, or was it handed to me? The mind is a supreme instrument. It can build cathedrals, and it can cure diseases. but it makes a terrible master. If you allow it to run on the automatic programming of your childhood, it will build a cage around you and lock the door from the inside. You must step into the seat of awareness. You must observe the thought without becoming the thought. You must learn the alchemy of taking the lead out of your inner dialogue and turning it into gold. The power to construct reality does not exist in the hands of your boss, your government, or your parents. It has always rested on your own tongue.
You came here looking for a technique. You came here looking for a way to silence the negative voice in your head so you can finally relax. But that is the wrong question. The right question is, why are you still so deeply committed to believing the lies it tells you? Chapter 4, The Severing. We're going to dismantle the architecture of your internal prison, and we're going to do it in 7 days. Why 7 days? Because that is the precise biological window required to begin starving an old neural pathway and establishing a new one. It is the exact amount of time needed to generate enough momentum that you can physically feel the fabric of reality beginning to bend around you. But to build a new house, you must first survey the rot in the old foundation. Day 1 is the day of pure silence. When you wake up tomorrow morning, you are going to do something you have likely never done in your entire adult life. You are going to observe your own mind without attempting to change it. Most people are so completely fused with their internal dialogue that they do not even realize a conversation is happening. Tomorrow, your only task is to become a neutral, cold, and impartial witness. When you look in the mirror tomorrow morning, just listen. Pay attention to the exact adjectives your mind uses to describe your face, your age, your weight. When you sit in traffic and someone cuts you off, watch the immediate burst of internal hostility. When you sit down to do your work, notice the heavy, quiet whisper that suggests you are an imposter, that you are falling behind, that everyone else has figured out a secret you somehow missed. Do not fight the thoughts. Do not judge yourself for having them. Just watch them. Look at your own mental patterns with the quiet detachment of a scientist observing a chemical reaction behind thick glass. You will likely be appalled by what you hear. You will realize that you have been living with an abuser. Day 2 is the audit. Now that you can hear the voice clearly, you must trace it to its origin. The thoughts in your head did not generate themselves out of thin air. They were planted. When the voice tells you that you are entirely unqualified for the room you were standing in, stop. Draw a slow breath. Ask the mind a direct question. Where did this exact phrase come from? Is this my voice, or is this the echo of a teacher who humiliated me in the 4th grade? Is this my own belief, or is this the financial terror of my parents, downloaded into my nervous system before I was old enough to defend myself? You will discover that you are possessed by ghosts. You are carrying the unresolved pain, the profound limitations, and the unhealed anxieties of the people who raised you. You have mistaken their luggage for your own identity. Once you see the pattern, you can break it. Day 3 is the severing. The intervention technique is violently simple, but it carries a clinical precision that alters the brain. The moment you catch yourself inside a descending spiral of self-hatred, you are going to physically sever the connection. You are going to say, internally or out loud, stop, or cancel, or delete. You are cutting the flow of the corrupted code midstream. You are halting the electrical signal before it reaches the emotional center of the brain. You do not need to immediately replace it with a wildly optimistic declaration. That feels like a lie to your nervous system. If you feel miserable and you force yourself to say, I am wonderfully happy, the mind will reject it. Simply cut the cord. Stop the sentence before it finishes. Leave the space entirely blank. Every single time you interrupt the automatic program, you are proving to your own psyche that the voice is not the master of the house.
You are. Chapter 5. The Architecture. By the fourth morning, the old programming will begin to feel foreign to you. You will start to notice how absurdly cruel you have been to yourself for decades. The silence you created on day 3 has cleared the ground. Now, the alchemy begins. Day 4 is the day of fierce grace. You are going to begin speaking to yourself the way you would speak to an entity you were entirely responsible for protecting. If a young child came to you trembling, terrified that they had failed a test or made a social error, you would not stand over them and list their flaws. You would not tell them they were useless. You would lower your voice. You would offer patience. You would offer a steady hand and perspective. You must now extend that exact same grace to yourself. When you make a mistake on the 4th afternoon, instead of launching an internal assault and calling yourself incompetent, you will pause. You will ask the mind a different question. What is the exact lesson hidden inside this failure? When you encounter a difficult problem, instead of fixating on all the reasons you cannot overcome it, you will force the mind to retrieve the memory of the 3 worst things you have already survived in your past. You will remind your own body of its durability. You will shift from being your own worst critic to becoming your own most devoted advocate. Day 5 is the structural shift. This is where you rewrite the physics of your reality. You will permanently banish the words "I cannot" from your internal vocabulary. "I cannot speak in public" is a death sentence for your potential. "I am currently learning how to hold the attention of a room" is an open door. "I cannot build my own business" is an acceptance of defeat. "I am currently learning the mechanics of independence" is a declaration of war against your own limitations. "I cannot find the right relationship" is a permanent victimhood. "I am currently learning how to draw the right person naturally into my life" is an assumption of absolute power. These are not word games. When you change the language, you change the chemical state of the body. You stop closing doors and you start holding them wide open. You signal to the unconscious that the story is not over. It is actively being written.
We have been inside Carl Jung's world. We have mapped the collective unconscious. Now, I want to come back to yours. Because the shadow is not a psychiatric concept from 1913. It is your Thursday morning. Chapter 6. The Voice of the Archetype. We arrive at the final phase, elevation. Days 6 and 7 are where you stop speaking as the person you currently are, and you begin speaking exclusively as the person you are actively in the process of becoming. Day 6 is the conversation with the archetype. That confident, quiet, unshakable version of you is not a ghost. It is not a fantasy. Jung understood that your highest self already exists within your psyche right now as pure, unmanifested potential. It is an archetype. It is waiting for the right internal environment to step forward and take control of the body. Ask yourself, how does the final, fully realized version of you speak? When that person faces a financial loss, do they panic or do they simply begin calculating the recovery? When that person walks into a crowded room, do they wonder if people like them or do they simply assume they belong there? When that person sits alone in the dark, what do they feel? You must begin holding those exact conversations in your head right now. Not next year, not when you finally get the promotion, not when the bank account reaches a certain number. Today, you must generate the emotion of success before the success arrives. Day 7 is the integration. When you align your internal dialogue with your highest intentions, the physical body responds almost immediately. When you stop running the software of constant self-attack, your stress hormones plummet. Your nervous system stops preparing for a predator that does not exist. Your heart rhythm stabilizes. Your digestion repairs itself.
You stop exhausting your own life force in a bitter, silent war against your own mind. You will begin to sleep deeply. You will wake up feeling a strange, quiet lightness in your chest. And then the external world will begin to bend. People will treat you differently. They will not know why. They will simply feel a shift in the gravity around you. You will no longer enter a room radiating the desperate, anxious energy of someone seeking approval. You will enter radiating the rare, quiet stillness of someone who has finally made peace with themselves. The people around you will feel this conviction. Opportunities will align themselves with this new frequency. The world always makes way for a person who knows exactly who they are. But I must warn you of the cost. Your old habits will resist this change violently. The old personality, the one built layer by layer upon years of suffering and complaint, does not want to die. It will fight to keep you in the familiar misery it knows. It will tell you this practice is foolish. It will tell you that you are faking it. Expect the resistance. Welcome it. As Jung noted, the friction is the evidence that you are changing something that actually matters. You are standing at the absolute center of your own life. You can continue playing the corrupted code, and you will receive the exact same year you just had, repeated over and over until the end of your days. Or, with the very next breath you take, you can choose a different word. The master is already inside you. You simply need to hand them the microphone.
Carl Jung died on June 6, 1961. He was 85 years old. He passed away quietly in his home in Küsnacht, Switzerland, sitting near a window looking out over the water. He left us with this truth: I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. When the room gets dark tonight, whose voice is actually doing the talking? This has been powerful speech. A man with a heavy mustache sits alone in a cold boarding house room. He is watching the modern world construct a massive industry out of selling people their own purpose. And he is preparing to tell you why buying it will destroy you.